everybody, you know. Thank you. You got 6 o'clock? Okay. Everybody all set?
Yes.
Okay. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Council President Robert J. Sylvia. Vice President Paul M. Roderick.
Here.
Councilor Terry Flynn.
Here.
Councilor M. Teresa Sanchez.
Present.
Councilor Dennis P. Toronto.
Here.
Councilor Barbara A. Bonville.
Here.
Councilor Thomas P. Walton III.
Here.
Thank you, Wendy. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the
To the
flag,
flag,
United
of
States
United
of
States of
America,
America,
and to the republic
Republic for which
which
it
stands
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with
with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
Okay. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I would, quite a day. I would like to read a letter on behalf of President Sylvia. His resignation letter. I spoke with Bob today, and he gave me authorization to read it publicly. And then I would like to, if you just bear with me, I'd like to make a few comments. And this is Bob's letter to the town clerk this morning. Dear Miss Wendy Marshall, Town Clerk, it is with regret and for personal reasons that I am reluctantly writing to inform you of my decision to resign my elected position as a member of the Middletown Town Council effective immediately. I have proudly served the town of Middletown for more than 13 years as a member of the council and the last 7 years as the council president. Prior to that, I served 6 years as the chair of the Personnel Committee. During these 19 years, I have worked alongside amazing people, Town Administrator Sean Brown and his staff, council members, our solicitors, district and school leaders, business owners, volunteers, faith groups, and friends and neighbors, all working to make our community a better place to live, work, and play. I would like to especially recognize you, Ms. Marshall, and your deputy clerk, Karen Clancy. You both are to be commended for your tireless dedication to our town, which I personally thank you for. Lastly, I want to thank my wife for standing by my side during this endeavor and being the person I could always depend on. This, I know, has been a long road for her as well. Respectfully, Robert J. Sylvia, Council President. Having said that, I'd like to just make a few comments. You know, I'm sure all our phones are blowing up and text messages and emails and all kinds of stuff today. You know, I'm sure some of us were shocked. But, you know, Bob has to do it in the best interest of Bob and his family. Having said that, I'd like to address this letter to Bob. Bob, you are a great colleague, leader, mentor, and friend. Your leadership, experience, knowledge, and history of this great town will be sorely missed. The word great is in here by design because with your leadership and contributions over 13 years as the town councilor and 7 years as council president has put this town and community in the position that it is. Great. You always had Middletown's best interests in mind. Thank you for all your years of service, devotion to our town and all our residents. Middletown is in excellent shape due to your leadership. Best wishes to you and your family. You will certainly be missed. Thank you, Mr. President. Okay. So, did anybody else want to make any comments? So, Dennis?
Yeah, Paul, I want to thank you for reading that letter. Bob has done a lot for the community. You know, he had a career within town. He made a career of, being on the, serving the town. So I want to thank him for all his help and his leadership, to the town. And we will miss him. And, I hope he stays involved. And thank you for, putting that letter together.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. One of the things that, just a little more reflection, then we'll move on. One of the things that always struck me, and I didn't realize it until I got out of it the first time, was it's just as hard to get out as it is to get in. Because once you're in it, when you get involved and you get a grasp on it, after 2 or 3 or 4 years, whatever it is, it starts to become second nature, and you love the town, so you want to make it better. And, hey, look, at all times, we all respectfully disagree, and, but I think at the end, we're all trying to make the community better and pull the rope in the same direction. Sometimes we just differ on how to get there. So that's healthy. But again, he always had the best interest in Middletown at heart. And, like I said, it's as hard to get out as it was to get in. And I talked to him today, and it's a difficult decision, but, he has to do what's best for Bob and his family. And, we all thank him for his contribution, because you don't know until you sit in that chair, you don't know at points in times the weight of your that's on your shoulders. When things get heated on a topic, you're the council president's the one that's taking the heat. So anyway, look, Bob did a great job. He's going to be sorely missed. You sometimes you start as colleagues, you end up as real good friends. And, that's what makes it hard. So.
Mr.
Yes,
Vice Chair,
ma'am. Yes,
all
ma'am.
I've got to say to Mr. Sylvia, thank you for so much you've done for this town. You've been a great friend, checking up on me occasionally. Thank you so much for what you did for this town.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No doubt about it. So, okay, let's move on. Let's pick up where we left off on Monday evening. Number 28, I'll read it in. Memorandum of Town Planner in reference to Atlantic Beach District Utilities undergrounding revised cost estimates.
Motion to receive memorandum.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Sean?
The purpose of this memo is to bring the council up to date on where we are with the undergrounding of the utilities on Lower Quinnick Avenue. If the clerk could pull Ron Wolanski into the meeting, Ron can walk us through what has progressed over the last couple months. But essentially, we had provided an updated cost to you about the cost of the project. The cost had increased significantly. The council asked Ron to go back and work with the engineer to look at whether or not that number could reworked into a smaller number, but unfortunately that number continues to grow. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ron and let him update you on what has transpired.
Thanks, Sean. Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the council. So just, I guess, by way of a little bit of background, over the past couple of years, as Sean mentioned, we've been working with National Grid and our consultants to develop the best available cost estimates that we can at this stage for that potential project to underground the electric and other utilities within the Atlantic Beach District. This is a concept that originated back around 2007 with the Atlantic Beach District Master Plan. And then since then, and more recently, has been championed by the Economic Development Committee. As you know, that they've been communicating with the council about their desire to do more research in this area. So what you have in the memo is the latest estimates based on the best information we were able to get from National Grid. We went back and forth with them a couple of times to get the best information we could, get cost estimates revised. And as you can see, sort of the bottom line of the memo is that the estimate at this point is ranging from $17 to $20 million to complete that project, should it go forward. And I'll just point out that, again, we're still at a very early stage in terms of the design. So we wouldn't know the final costs of the potential project until final design is completed. And that design is done by National Grid. So in terms of tonight, what we're asking the town council to consider is what the next steps might be for this project. If the decision were to proceed with the project, the next step is to enter into an agreement with National Grid to complete the final design. However, prior to entering that agreement, and the town would have to pay for National Grid to do that design, the engineering work, the town must endeavor to communicate with all of the property owners that would be affected, all of those property owners that would have their services undergrounded from the National Grid line into the property. We would need 100% agreement. Every property owner that would be affected has to agree to participate in the project in order for National Grid to proceed with the design. So that's really the next step, should the council choose to proceed, is to reach out to those property owners within the district. We would have to work with National Grid to come up with the final list of all the property owners. They will identify, obviously, which property owners they feel would be affected, and we would work with that list and then reach out to those property owners. And I would expect that National Grid has some sort of a form that we would have to deliver to them with signatures of each of the property owners before they'd be willing to proceed to the design, the next phase of design. And I would just also point out that, and I know you're aware of this, the town has also been looking at a streetscapes improvement project along Aquidneck Avenue in the Atlantic Beach District. And that project, we're still hoping will be funded through Rhode Island DOT Transportation Improvement Program funding. And as we've talked about in the past, the intention is that once that project is designed, we would submit the design to Rhode Island Department of Transportation for inclusion in the state tip for funding. However, we've been on hold with that design because of needing the decision as to whether the town intends to proceed with the undergrounding of utilities. We can't complete the design for the streetscapes project until we know what's happening with the utilities project. So I just wanted to make that point as well. So that's the background. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Terry?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, Mr. Acting President. What are we doing?
Vice President.
Okay. Two things, Ron. I know that we talked about this a little bit at the MEDAC meeting. The group did. So I'm not sure if that update is, wants to be brought forward. I think that the chairman was going to make some inquiries. Also, I thought I saw today a flash that National Grid is selling Rhode Island to a Pennsylvania-owned company. Anybody else hear that? I'm not sure where this will stand with that. Thank you.
So just on your first point there, at the last, well, not just the last, but for the past few meetings, this topic has been on the agenda for MEDAC, and there's been discussion of perhaps bringing in a project manager to help decide or help, I guess, review what we have at this point from National Grid and from the town's consulting engineers to determine or help us see if there's any alternative designs that might be less expensive. So that's the conversation that Terry is referencing.
Okay, any other councils have any other comments on this? Because, you know, we're gonna decide what, you know, figure out how we want to proceed. Mr. Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Ron, I just have a question about first page under National Grid. It says construction to support National Grid improvements. And in the document, it said that the town was responsible for laying the conduit that the wires would go through. So is that what that 2.9 million is? Page 1.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Okay, so there's no additional, that 17 to 20 or whatever the number was is the full, that's everything you can think of at this point.
The only thing, and I think this is noted somewhere in the memo, the only thing that's not included in that is right-of-way acquisition, and that's really easements that we would expect to be necessary to install transformers that might be outside of the street right-of-way on private property. We wouldn't know what easements are required and what the cost of those easements would be until the final design is complete.
Okay, and my only other question is more broad, probably to the council, because I don't know the background. How did it get here? Or, I mean, can somebody give me the 3-sentence background on why we're considering this?
Well, I'm not sure we can do that in 3 sentences, but we can certainly do it. And Ron, you're probably the guy to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, it goes back to the Atlantic Beach District Master Plan. And during that process, which was a public process where ideas were thrown out for how to improve that area of town from an aesthetic, appearance point of view, and also as a business development point of view. That was one of the ideas that was brought out, is burying the utilities as being something that could enhance the area. There's been progress sort of in fits and starts over the past 12 or so years since that plan came out. We've done the intersection improvements. We've been working on the streetscapes project. So we've had these projects sort of coming along over the past several years, and this is one that again has also been part of that conversation over the past few years.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sean?
Any other councils? Sean?
I just, to fill in the dollars, because I think that's an important part of this conversation. Originally, this project had a cost of roughly $5 million, and that's what the TIF was designed around. That's basically, so we would borrow $5 million, and then with the tax increment, we would finance the debt service related to that. It's important to note that last year, we collected 1 year of those taxes 2 years ago. Last year, we took that money and we allocated it to the school department when we didn't raise taxes, but we wanted to increase funding to the Department of Education. So there's, as we consider moving this forward, we would have to build that roughly $480,000 back into the tax rate. So that's one piece. And then based on the dollar amounts that are being estimated right now, being 17 or $20 million, the difference between the $5 million we could raise from the TIF, we would have to issue a general obligation bond somewhere between 12 and $15 million, which would require voter approval. So that would be another step. And then the one cautionary piece in there is when you look at the debt service ratios that are issued by the Public Finance Management Board of the state of Rhode Island, we more or less have about $12 million that we could borrow right now and stay within the ratios that are recommended by the state of Rhode Island. So, this is a project that would basically, if the council decided to continue pursuing it, would extinguish really what would be considered the safe amount of money that we could borrow before we really have to start looking at, I don't know, a more, looking at our borrowing more carefully and making certain that people and businesses can afford it when we're putting the budget together. So that is an important part to this. The cost is increased significantly, and the amount of borrowing that would be outside of the TIF does push us up to the limit of borrowing that would be recommended by the state of Rhode Island.
So, thank you, Sean, because I was going to ask about the dollars. So this is just my opinion. I still look at that design and I think it's awesome. But then I look at what we have going on around us holistically as far as senior housing and all the other projects. I mean, senior housing, it's been, we have to tackle that. Do we want to do it on our own there? Or do we want to go the financing route? Those are things we have to decide, but they all, just in my opinion, they all, we have to have those discussions collectively and holistically, because, we certainly don't want to stretch out too far financially. We just can't do that. And Sean, I have a question though. Does that 12 million that we could potentially borrow, are you saying that the TIF would be able to pay that back if it was reinstated, or would you have to look else? The TIF would only finance 5 million. Where would the other 7 million come from? I guess that's the way I'm looking at it.
No, you would have the 5 million from the TIF, and that would be a TIF financing avenue. But on the general obligation bond, which is supported by the taxpayers, you would be able to borrow another $12 million and still maintain good borrowing ratios.
Yeah.
So it would be 5 and 12, not 5 and 7.
Do we have any debt that's going to be retiring soon? I know the police station, that's the first one that comes to mind. I think that was 2008. So we're only 12 years into that out of a 20-year bond. So those are kind of things running through my mind.
Yep. So Mark in the finance office prepares a debt service report every year. It was in the budget last year, and we've updated that. So that's something I could provide to you in an email after the meeting. And it's something that's provided to the council each year with the budget.
Okay.
To answer your question specifically, I just don't have it in front of me to say when
Okay.
the next round of debt's coming off the books.
Right. Okay. Councilor Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I just have a question for Ron. So the next step you said was you have to get 100% buy-in from the property owners. Could you do that before we entered into the agreement with National Grid for the next design phase? In other words, you got a whole bunch of pushback, then we would know it wasn't going to fly anyway.
Yes, yeah, we would need to do that before we could enter into the agreement for the final design. National Grid won't go ahead until we have that 100% buy-in.
Does that cost any money? Is that a town thing with a?
Yeah, that's a town thing. We would have to reach out to the property owners.
The only thing I would add is that we do need to have some idea of how much property we would need to obligate through easements, because you're going to have to locate transformers along the roadway or on the property. So the property owners, certain property owners are going to lose property, which may impact their parking or other issues on the small parcels. We would need to spend some money on the engineer to do a little bit of work before we can approach the property owner, so we can say, look, Sean's restaurant needs to give up so much space for a transformer. And then from a zoning standpoint, make sure there's not a parking issue or something like that.
I don't know how my colleagues feel, but my gut tells me it's a lot of money at this point with a lot of unknowns. Do we want to keep going, spending money and then make a decision? Or do you want to make a decision now about spending, upwards of $20 million to bury these lines? Councilor Flynn.
So my first question is this a time critical decision? Is this in front of us because we have a time frame that we need to make a decision? Because some things other than the streetscapes project, is there a deadline that we're working against, Ron?
No, there's no deadline per se, but there is that issue of the delay in the streetscapes design.
So I'm just wondering if, because there are a couple of things. One of the reasons the MEDAC conversation came up, as I understand it, is because, the Indian Avenue property area is privately working on a similar project. And I think that there's quite a disparity between the costs. Now, maybe it's, you can't compare the projects, but I think that was part of the inquiry that the MEDAC chairman was going to find out about. And, because this may be, when we have work done, we always get 3 bids to see if they're in line. And we only have one from National Grid. And now, I don't know if the status of National Grid selling Rhode Island to Pennsylvania might, bring in another whole viewpoint of this project by another company. So, not to cause delays, but I just think that we may have some information that we might want to nail down before we choose a path.
Councilor Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Procedurally, I have a question. If we were just to go around the screen here and say, what your gut is at the moment, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, is that a fair thing to do without making a motion? And my point is, if everybody was thinking, no, not doing it, then you just make a motion to do it and it goes away right now. Or the other way.
I think that's just discussion. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it's
what
just
you're doing.
discussion.
That's fine.
Peter?
No, that's fine. I mean, just a general discussion of everyone expressing what their viewpoint is before a motion is made. There's nothing wrong with that. Assuming everybody-
Okay, thank you, Peter. Councilor Toronto.
Thanks, Mr. Vice President. Yeah, this is quite a jump from what we originally had. I was on MEDAC and this project, and as we were forming the TIF, we were given a number around $5 million. Kind of curious how we went from 5 million to 20 million. If we wait another another year, we'll be up to 30 million. I got to be honest, when I work with National Grid, and I just feel we got to have a better working relationship with them. If you ask people if they want underground utility, they're all going to raise their hand yes. And then when you get the price tag for it, everyone's like, can't afford it. Just amazing to me that you can have a big demand and there's no supply because it's too expensive. Our residents have asked. I've talked to National Grid about, dropping poles in different places. My grandfather had an end of a line that ran behind his house, and he was looking to drop that line, just that one pole, and it was $40,000 to do it. And then you also have to dig the hole. You got to dig the line, and you also got to put all the piping in. And they send out 15 people to lay it in like 2 days, and they're off, and you pay $40,000. So it's, to me, is a little, disturbing that this is a service that people want, but we can't afford it because there's only one company you can get it from. It's a monopoly. And so I don't know if we'll ever be able to afford it. And this number shocked me too. I mean, and it's like, wow. And, I don't know. It just, it definitely, but if money wasn't in the equation, we would bury these lines. And this will probably be the only chance we have to bury these lines. Because when you do this, everything else, you're not going to want to rip it up if you decide to do it for some reason. This town hits the mega bucks. But I'm just, a little disappointed because we do want them underground, and I wish they were affordable because I think it would be good for that area and it would be good for the businesses, and it would be a nice location for people to visit. We can be above ground. They just put some on Shore Drive down here, and to put the poles in, and they put them a lot higher up in the air, so the wires higher up. What's kind of interesting though is the electric wires are a lot thinner and it's a lot cleaner, versus they don't have the side poles, the pole with the top beam across. It's all straight up now, so it is a lot cleaner. And what sticks out the most is Verizon and on the pole itself. I don't know if we could bury those utilities and leave the electric above ground, if that makes any sense. If there's any cost savings to that, but again, just a little disappointed the cost is so high. I mean, $20 million is a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, just me personally, my gut tells me no because of the cost. I just don't know how we afford that. I think we'd all like to do it. I would certainly love to see something like that. Having said that, Sean, I have a question. Is there any other type of improvements that we could make if we didn't have that, given the funds to be able to do it? Any type of other improvements that would certainly fit into our budget?
So what Ron was talking about is the streetscape improvement project, which includes the wider sidewalks, I think a micro park, improving the intersections. It's essentially the work we're looking for the state to do. So as the project has been conceived, we would do the design work, bring it up to DOT, and basically look for them to give us the money to do the project ourselves, like we've done on other projects in the town successfully. So we would do the design work to accelerate the improvements down in that business district. It just wouldn't include the component of the buried utilities. And I understand there's an argument to wait and see what happens, but there is going to be quite a bit of infrastructure money coming into the state of Rhode Island, into the Department of Transportation. So being shovel ready right now, I think, is a competitive advantage to get these projects done sooner. And Ron may have some more insight onto that with the transportation improvement plan, but I think that's the thought process if the council doesn't proceed with the utilities. I don't know, Ron, if you want to add anything.
The only thing I would add, and I don't know if Paul, you were getting to this point too, with the TIF, we do have the TIF in place. So even if the undergrounding of utilities doesn't go forward, that the way the TIF was adopted, it would allow that funding to be used for other improvements within that district boundary. So that funding could actually go, a portion of it, towards a streetscapes project or any other improvements, public improvements within the district boundaries.
Would there be a redesign if, the poles aren't buried?
No, because we haven't gotten to that point in the design yet. You may recall we'd had that presentation, I don't know, it's probably 2 years ago now, of the concept where we had those renderings and we presented at a town council meeting. So that's basically conceptual design. That's where we are at this point. So we are waiting for this decision to be made before we go to that next step in the design.
Okay. Any other council have any other comments they'd like to make? Or ideas?
No, one question, Paul.
Okay.
Thank you. Sean, can you explain again with the TIF itself? I know you just said year one, we instituted the TIF, and then we took the money, it was the incremental money that was in that area, rather than putting it into the total, rather than putting it for general use of the population, we separated it and we're going to use it in this district. And then the next year, that was the year that we didn't do that, and we just took that money from that area and used it for the general population.
So in the first year, which would be last year,
Okay.
We increased the tax rate, or we allowed the money from the increase in value to go into the TIF, which is a restricted fund. So there is a fund with $480,000 in it right now, and that's in the town's books. So when we were looking at last year's budget and there was a loss of revenue really throughout the town, a decision was made in order to provide more money to support the school teachers contract, rather than appropriate the money from the general fund into the TIF, the money was appropriated to the school department. So that's what happened in this year. As we look at the budget coming up, the decision would be whether or not to restrict those dollars again and redirect it to the TIF, allow them to continue to go towards the school department, or take them from elsewhere. But basically, we need to replenish, if we're going to jumpstart the TIF fund again, we need to identify dollars to direct to it.
Sure. What was the dollar amount from last year? Do you know?
It's that $480,000 number.
Is it 480 again? Okay.
It's like 471 or 480.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Terry?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. It seems like either we, I'd like to know if people are interested in waiting to get some of those answers regarding, the price disparity of undergrounding, or what's going to happen with National Grid. And if not, then it's the decision of whether to spend the 17 or to commit to attaining the $17,000 to $20,000 or not. So I just want to know what everyone, if I can do this, Mr. Solicitor, you said we could sort of get the feel of everybody if they're interested in finding out this information.
If everybody wants to express their opinion, then they're free to do that.
Mrs. Santos?
We have so many projects on the books, and I would like to say that I would like to have the town administrator to get more information, and hopefully the cost would not go up. Get the information and get back to us and see if there's anything else out there that he could relay to us, and then we could finally approve it in one way or the other, either approve it or not approve it. That's how I feel on it. I think more information, as Ms. Flynn said, that National Grid has been sold. What are we looking at? Are they going to up the price? So I think more information is needed before a vote is taken. That's my own personal opinion.
Okay. Tom?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I guess I know this is hard to do, and I understand what Mr. Santos just said, but I'm kind of in that same vein. So if we said, just for ballpark numbers, to have it on a piece of paper, senior center, if we paid for it so that we could be restrictive to the people, then that would cost X number of dollars. What was the other one? Whatever the big questions that we're going to come up with like this season, then we could say, the Aquidneck Ave thing looks more doable, or, to have something to compare it to, I guess is what I'm looking at. But I know the longer we wait, the higher the cost. So
Yeah. Okay. Dennis?
No, I said what I had to say. I just think that, National Grid's got, as Terry said, they sold. It was announced this morning, breaking news. They got that big problem with the undersupplying the island, right? We've got that big issue going on with National Grid as well. So there's a lot on our plate with National Grid, and we need to address it. And I wish they would work with us, because this is something I would like to see. I don't want to go put all these resources, make it a beautiful area, and then you leave the poles up. We know how beautiful it looks without the poles. The Indian Ave was financed by an independent group of folks to do it in their neighborhood. We did it out at Statuus Point. That looks gorgeous, and that was through funding and things. Paul, you've said to me several times, boy, it'd be nice if we could underground some of these utilities, on West Main and different areas to make it look good. It's just amazing, but we're at a point where we're going to say we're always going to have above ground utilities because we can't afford it. It's just amazing to me. If you were to build a new facility, if you were to build a new neighborhood, it's law, you got to put them underground. Okay, but they keep coming and replacing the ones that are above ground. You know, they just put up brand new ones all over Easton's Point. And they're still doing it. I shake my head. I said, why are you putting all these poles up? And then we get, you know, outages because of the tree lines. And I'm like, people are losing power. They're losing food. It's such a burden. Just amazes me. It frustrates me. But I find it hard to pull the trigger on $20 million to underground them. So I'm a little frustrated with it, but I'll go along with what the people want to do and what the council decides to do.
Okay, Terry? Sorry, Bob.
Excuse me. So just a quick question, maybe for Ron. You said there was infrastructure money coming, and I'm not sure if any of that could be used for this project down here on the Atlantic Beach District, or if there might be other monies that might be available for any of what we're trying to do down there.
It was actually Sean that mentioned infrastructure money. I'm not sure exactly what's available at the moment. There's been a lot of talk at the national level about a big infrastructure bill, hopefully in this Congress coming through, and whether that would provide funding to RIDOT for road projects or any other infrastructure projects. We'd have to wait and see on that.
And you have the recently approved road bond project from the state. But the state's policy is generally, and this is the problem we ran into on Aquidneck Avenue with the sidewalks up by the intersection of Aquidneck and East Main Road, is that the policy of DOT is not to upgrade the utilities. They won't upgrade the water lines. They won't use the transportation dollars to upgrade the electrical system. They're restricted by the federal regulations from doing that. So, it ultimately goes back to something that would be a matter adjudicated. If you're looking for money from somewhere else, it's going to come from the utility. It's going to come through the PUC, and it will be a debate on whether or not local people pay for it, but whether all of Rhode Island's ratepayers pay for it. And it's just unlikely to happen. I think that's just the reality of this. The point I make with the infrastructure money is that the longer we wait and the longer we're not ready, the longer we don't have a shovel-ready project. So when money does come along, we'll miss out on the opportunity.
Thank you.
Mrs. Von Villis?
Yeah, I have a rule that I kind of like to live by, and it's based on the idea that closure is a wonderful thing. It seems to me that when you spread yourself too thin and you try to look at too many projects at the same time, you get nothing done. And quite frankly, I feel as though we get nothing done. We talk and talk and talk and get nothing done. I would rather limit us to a few projects that we can focus on so that we actually can come to closure and make things happen for the people in Middletown.
Okay, that's a great point. I would just turn back to, I think you know how I feel about the 20 million. Like to be able to get it done. At this point, I don't think it's doable. I turn back to our priorities, and our number one priority to me was the senior housing. I think that needs to be resolved before, in my opinion, just one vote, one person, before we go and spend money anywhere else.
Mr. Paul?
Mr. Toronto, I'll get you next, Mr. Sinos.
Thank you.
So I just want to say, I don't see anything wrong with what Terry proposed. If we not going to put much time on it, but I think there will be some things that will shake out, will come to us in regards to how this, and let's put it out 3 months. We don't need to talk about it for another 2 or 3 months. Let's put it out there and see what comes of this acquisition and, of the companies. And let's just see how this gets through the summer kind of thing. And then maybe it will open up somehow. We'll see there are more funding coming from the state, or again, I'm with you. It's a lot of infrastructure, a lot of money to go underground, and even if the feds are going to give it to us, got to remember that's money we got to pay back, as the nation itself. So
Yeah.
I'd be in favor of pushing it out 3-4 months and then bringing it back for discussion since we don't have a deadline. I know the streetscaping is the big issue and the timing of that. So that's my opinion.
Okay. Is that what everyone like to do? I know we don't want to continue to kick the can down the road, but given the new information just as of today, I don't see it getting any cheaper. But if you guys want to wait and see what happens, that's fine with me. Okay. So,
Mr. Vice, we don't need a motion that's been presented.
no, if everybody's good with that, it's just discussion and we'll readdress this. If Sean, how are we going to know with Nash, the new company, who's going to be in contact with them? You're muted.
I would imagine at some point I'll hear from our municipal liaison about the transition and
Okay.
a new contact would be assigned.
Okay. All right. So at that time, we would look for an update. Fair enough.
Yes, one thing that council could consider is just to, and Peter or Wendy could correct me, table it or continue it to some date out in 90 days or, somewhere out in the future so we don't lose it. That might be my suggestion.
Is there any idea about the time frame between hearing from the municipal liaison and the state transportation monies?
Nothing concrete.
Okay. Okay. Okay, we do have somebody that would like to speak. Kathy Silvera has her hand up. Karen, can you bring her in? And Kathy, if you could unmute, would love to hear what you have to say.
Kathy Silvera, 52 Center Avenue. And I'm just a little bit off topic, but I'm on topic for what, oh, wait a minute. What Denny was saying, that's for my next meeting. Denny was saying about the telephone poles up in our area. I live over on Center Avenue. This place is a train wreck. As 2 weeks ago at 7:30 in the morning, those Asplunk guys or whatever they are, pulled up in front of my driveway, blocked both cars in, stabilized the truck. This is at 7:30. I came downstairs. My husband's like, oh, the electric guys are here. So at 7:30, he had to go out and move the vehicles so that I could get out to go to work. He could get out to go to work. And then the guy said, oh, and by the way, we're going to shut your power down for a few hours. So Dave said, well, were you going to tell anybody? He goes, well, sometimes we go to houses that have cars in the driveway and tell them. So this has been going on for over 3 weeks.
Yeah.
The other day, First Safe replaced all the poles, which we knew nothing about that. Now they're going to redo all the electric with nobody knowing anything. And the whole neighborhood is like working from home right now. And I just think that we have bad, I can't even think of the word right. Bad communication with National Grid, with Asplunk, with, the police department are out there. I mean, I know they have to be out there. And I think I called Warren. I hate throwing Warren under the bus, but Warren said, well, you need to call PUC. I don't feel that as a resident, I should have to be calling PUC to find out what's going on.
Yeah.
So I know that Denny had said that about the polls, but we're getting all new polls. And now we're finding out that this could take up to 6 months.
Mhm.
But we were never even advised of any of this.
Okay.
So the street is blocked off sometimes for days on end with no signs.
Okay.
All of a sudden you drive up and you can't get out. You got to turn around and go back. So thanks for listening.
Okay, Kathy, thank you. Hey, Sean, Mr. Sanders, excuse me a minute. Sean, is there any way to communicate with representatives of National Grid that, maybe if they can't, or their processes or policies notify residents, maybe we could?
This has been an ongoing discussion. It's one I've had with Councilor Toronto and Councilor Welch. It is not that easy. There's not a centralized clearing place for the work orders, but
Right.
I will reapproach National Grid tomorrow
Okay.
and see if there's something we can do. If at least do something for the Center Ave project or whatever they're referring to that project as, and try to get the neighbors some information.
Yeah, or maybe if we could just get a list of, projects that they're going to be doing like this and maybe a time frame, and, we could maybe post that on our own website.
Yeah.
Mrs. Santos.
Thank you, sir. To Kathy Silveria's claim 7:30 in the morning, it was better than after the council meeting Monday night. Got to go to bed, 12:30 midnight, I started hearing banging. They're outside working on the poles between my house and the next house at 12:30 at night or in the morning, however you want to call it. And they've been putting the poles on the sidewalks, making the folks walk on the street. That I think should be prohibited. Do not put the poles on the sidewalks. Put them on the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Two things. I actually had sent an email to Mr. Brown and Chief Cure inquiring about resident notification, since the police have to schedule the details. So they do know in advance where, or that they're needed. I don't know what the process is, but certainly that department knows that something's going to go on because they need to schedule the detail in advance. So maybe that might be a place to start, and then to put that information out, what area is going to be working on. So I put that out, and I think I would like to make a motion to continue this to our June 21st meeting. That would be about 3 months. And then we can see what the new and improved information is and make a final decision.
Okay. Before we do that, I'll second that, Terry, but before we do that, we have someone that would like to speak.
Excuse me.
Karen, if you can bring in Leon Amarant. Leon, if you could just unmute and state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, sir. Leon Amarant, 60 Island Drive, Middletown.
Thank you.
I'm listening to the conversation on the utilities undergrounding. I think it would be disappointing if that didn't happen. While I was listening, I did just do a couple quick Google searches to see if there's any funding out there to do things like this. I found a site called scenic.org. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with it, but just real quick, I wanted to just bring it to your attention. Apparently there is some funding available for things like this. And I can just read what they said here. Federal sources, I'm on the site right now. One way for communities to pay for utility relocation is through the Federal Transportation Enhancements Program under the Transportation Equity Act for the 21st Century, TEA 21. Through their State Department of Transportation, communities can apply for transportation enhancement funds for utility burial or relocation under the categories of landscaping, scenic beautification, or scenic historic highway programs and welcome centers. Utility relocations are often incorporated as part of a larger project to improve local appearance. For example, Vidalia, Georgia, and Augusta, Maine used TE funds to bury utility wires as part of their downtown improvement projects. Maryland has also used Federal Community Development Block Grants, CDBG, to fund utility relocation projects. I feel like we're kind of, this plan has been in place for a while. We do have a project outlined. Maybe that's something worth looking into. Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you for the information, Leon. Sean, did you get that, scenic.org?
I did, and we've worked with them. We were in contact with them on the Secaucus Point project, and I believe Turner Scott's working with them on the Indian Avenue project. So we'll look at that tomorrow too.
Excellent. Okay, so there's a motion and a second to continue this to the June 21st meeting. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Good discussion. All right, let's move to number 29, Memorandum of Finance Director in reference to financial report, 7 months ended January 31st, 2021.
Motion to receive said memorandum and report.
Okay, we have a motion, and can I get a second, please?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Mark. And I think Mark had some wonderful slides for us to view.
Do have a slide. Good evening, Mr. Vice President, members of the council. I do have
Evening.
a slide. Okay, so this report is for the 7 months of the fiscal year through January 31st, 2021. And for the general fund, the total expenses exceeded the revenues by $1.92 million compared to $2.9 million in the prior fiscal year. Tax collections are $462,000 higher than the prior year, and the hotels and meals tax is lower by $360,000. I'd just like to say during this fiscal year, we did take into account the anticipated reduction in the hotels and meals tax. For the school department, the revenues exceeded the expenses by $2.7 million. For the Parks and Recreation Fund, total expenses exceeded the revenues by $698,000 compared to a $60,000 surplus in the prior year. In the prior year, you also had $500,000 of capital replenishment revenue, which is not included in the 21 numbers because we suspended that program. And so therefore, because of the beach season was so different this year with COVID, the revenue is lower by $491,000. For the sewer fund, the total expenses exceeded the revenues by $777,000 compared to $987,000 in the prior year. And the timing of when we have to pay debt service, it's the beginning of the year is when the bulk of it is due and paid. So we receive the revenue throughout the remaining fiscal year. For the refuse and recycling fund, the total revenues exceeded expenses by $243,000 compared to $345,000 in the prior year. Refuse permit revenue is slightly higher than the prior year by $3,000. Thank you.
Okay, Mark, I just have one question. The school department, the total revenues exceeded expenses by 2.7 million. Could you just explain that, please? Because that's a number that really glares out, and I want to make sure that everyone understands the reason behind that.
That was for the general fund, you said? Yeah.
The school department, yeah, general fund.
Yes. So their revenues are collected more up front, and then they have the timing of when all their expenses happen.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a lot of the timing, because by the end of the year, there really isn't a surplus.
Okay. All right. So any councils have any questions of where we stand after 7 months in on the current budget? Dennis?
Yeah, I just want to ask Mark if there's any concerns he has, things that we should be aware of, just from a general operations expense type of thing.
There were really no concerns. We're tracking towards budget. It would have been the hotel and meals tax with that revenue lower, but we did account for that, the anticipated loss of revenue due to COVID.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Number 30, memorandum of finance director through town administrator with enclosures, reference to town pension plan actuarial valuation report, June 30th, 2020.
Motion to receive said memorandum and report.
Okay. Can I get a
Second.
second? Thank you, Mrs. Vaughn. We have a motion to second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Mark?
This report, I do have a slide. So this is my cover memo. This report is an annual study that is done on the private pension that the town has. This is a closed plan. And for the total pension liability, it decreased by 434,000. And the plan assets decreased by 1.2 million from the 60 million that you see on the second line to 58.8 million. This has to do with the way the market is reflected in the investments. We have a 7.5 interest assumption in all of these numbers, and when the interest earnings and the investment earnings are lower than that, this plan, since it is a closed plan and it's 100% funded, it's all affected by that. So it is lower. The investments were lower, so therefore the plan assets decreased. This decrease is spread over a 5-year smoothing, so you don't absorb that one hit in 1 year. The actuarially determined contribution increased 785,000 compared to 86,000 last year. So this is what we use as a basis for the 2022 budget that you'll be receiving. So the pension contribution would increase. Your funding status decreased 1.3%. It was 102%, and now it's 98.9. So it's still very well funded, and all of the funding doesn't get affected by the investment earnings because it is 100% funded or close to it. And all this is the funding plan that the council adopted in May of 2013 has been followed. So when the plan reaches 100%, any of the actuarially determined contributions shift to the OPEB. So in this current, in the budget proposal that you'll be receiving, since these contributions now have to increase in the pension, we'll be moving some of the contributions from the OPEB back to the pension plan. As for the census, you have 4 actives compared to 7 last year, and a total of 137 participants as of June 30, 2020, compared to 142 last year.
Okay.
Thank you. And
Thanks, Mark. Does any councilors have any questions of Mark's presentation on the actuarial? Terry?
Muted.
Thank you. I just have a comment. I think it's unusual to have these, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Tangway, but it's unusual in a good way to be so funded. I'm not sure that many communities can boast that. Do I have that wrong?
you are correct.
So
It is one. There are a few communities that have pension plans 100 or over, but it's very rare. You are correct.
So that's a hats off to Mr. Brown and his staff and the finance department. It is something really to be proud of. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
I would actually just point out Mrs. Santos has a hand in that, because when she was the finance director, the town of Middletown chose what's called the aggregate cost method to fund the pension, which from a technical standpoint is a disciplined approach to making certain that the pension was funded in the early years. So while she's online, and oftentimes we rib each other over certain things, it is noteworthy that that decision to fund using that methodology was beneficial to this day. So thank you, Mrs. Santos.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you.
All right, Dennis.
I also like to thank the people and the residents, because, you know, this is their hard-earned money as well that went in to help fund these pensions. So that was a great, you know, it's a great thing that Middletown can say that. I've been online, I've seen the other pensions, and there was the liabilities for those other towns, and we don't have that that burden on our shoulders. So it's awesome that we did that. And it is, the people paid and, and invested in this community. So hats off to the community as well.
Okay. Okay, any other comments? All right, thank you. Number 31, memorandum of finance director through town administrator with enclosures in reference to town OPEB actuarial valuation report dated June 30th, 2020.
Motion to receive said memorandum and report.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Mark?
This report is for the retirees. It's the other post-employment benefits. This study is done every year. One year it's actual valuation, and the other year they do a statistical. This one was an actual valuation report. Your plan assets increased by $3 million. It went from 15 million to 12 million. The annual recommended contribution for the current report decreased by 465,000. So it went from 1.9, almost 2 million to 1.5 million. The funding status increased 12.8% in 1 year from 42.3 to 55.1. And again, all of this is possible because of the council's decision back in, like I mentioned in the pension, where when that got 100% funded, we shifted those payments to this fund because this fund was very underfunded. Even at 55.1%, this is a good percentage based in Rhode Island. Not many communities have this percentage in the OPEB trust funds. There are 349 active members and 141 retirees, and their spouses are 80. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Does anybody have any questions about the OPEB fund? No? Okay. Let's move on to number 32. Memorandum of Finance Director through Town Administrator with enclosures in reference to 2021 contract extension. MIDD-017-021 portable toilets.
Motion to receive said memorandum.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Sean.
I'm going to continue to let Mark address this as the purchasing agent.
Okay.
I do have my cover memo, yes.
Yep.
This is a request to extend the contract for the portable toilets at the beach and the parks for the upcoming season. This originally went out to bid, and we had two vendors bid, and Holman's was the one that was successful with the award. The original contract was for 2 years, and it included 3 one-year terms. This contract for the 2021 season would be the 3rd year of the 3 additional 1-year extensions. I spoke to Scott Holman at Holman Septic, and they offered to keep the prices the same. This contract's price has remained the same throughout the contract if you do extend it 1 more year. So I will ask you to approve the contract extension for 1 more year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Any questions from any councils? Okay, Mr. Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I'd just like to say from the soccer standpoint and other places that we've had Holman toilets, I always thought they were nice and clean and well maintained. So I am definitely a yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, so let's move on to the resolution, number 33. Resolution of the council in reference to award of 2021 contract extension to Middletown -017-021 portable toilets.
Motion to pass said resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, number 34, memorandum of finance director through town administrator with enclosures, with enclosure reference to establishment of the library community Garden Special Revenue Fund.
Motion to receive said memorandum.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Sean?
It's a very straightforward request. It's a requirement for the town. The library operates its garden in the back of the library. And what the library board of directors is asking for is that the money generated from the garden basically be restricted and be reused for operating the garden. And the money not being lost in the general fund. So what we're required to do in order to set up a special revenue fund to account for those monies is to have the council adopt the resolution that was prepared by the finance director.
Okay. Any discussion? Terry?
Just a clarification for anybody watching. I just want to clarify that this is money that is existing. The town isn't funding anything different or creating a fund that then we need to find money for. It's already money that exists. It's just going into a dedicated account. That's correct?
Yes,
Yes, it is.
it is.
Okay.
Yep, it is. It's just set up, they want it set up like that, so it's whatever money's collected from the garden goes into this fund to fund it, so that it doesn't go into the general fund and get lost, so to speak, okay?
Well,
Okay,
one quick,
Dennis,
thought it was a real interesting service. I wasn't aware they were doing that. I thought that was really pretty awesome. And I'd like to hear a little more about it, maybe during the budget season. So good stuff.
maybe you should go over there and green up your thumb a little bit, and dive right in, you know? Mrs. Santos.
As Mr. Welch pointed out to me, Mr. Tarani, you should take a ride by the library, as Mr. Welch told me to take a ride around.
Great, yeah, okay. I did. I went through it. I didn't make it to all the way to the back.
You should.
Oh,
All right. Okay. Number 35, resolution of the council reference to establishment of a library community garden special revenue fund.
Motion to pass said resolution.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, number 36, communication of tax assessor in reference to cancellation of taxes for certain Middletown residents.
Motion to receive said communication.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, any discussion? Okay. Number 37, resolution of the council in reference to cancellation of taxes for certain Middletown residents.
Motion to pass said resolution.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to pass said resolution. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, number 38, memorandum of finance director through town administrator in reference to refunding 2011 general obligation bonds.
Motion to receive said memorandum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Discussion, in my quick discussion with Sean, just a quick overview, and I'm sure he'll go into the weeds a little further than I will on this. Basically, it's a timing issue right now, and if we could save about $300,000 if we refinance the refunding of the funding of the general obligation bonds from 2011. So Sean, if you want to expound on that, that'd be great.
I'm going to let Mark get into the weeds. If we can pull him in, and he probably has a slide.
Okay.
But just in general, after bonds are issued for a certain period of time, we typically work with our financial advisor to start looking for opportunities to refinance those bonds. Generally, we look for savings in excess of 3% before we actually make the decision to go out and basically look for a lower rate. It's important to note that we don't extend the term of the bond. So if it is a 20-year bond and we've already paid on 10 years, when we refinance it, we're refinancing the last 10 years. We're not refinancing it for another 20. So I'll let Mark walk through his calculations and the work that he's done with Hilltop Securities to identify this savings, which is a good opportunity for the town.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Thank you, Sean. Yes, periodically, we do work with our financial advisors to look for opportunities to save money through refinancing. As Sean did mention, the threshold to see if it's worth refinancing is 3%. Working with the financial advisors, this refunding is at 11.624%, so it is well above the 3% threshold. This would, if you do approve this, it does not mean that we have to do the bonds in case there's a spike in the interest rates and it does not look as promising, but it does give us the opportunity to still proceed if the rates are good. This will also make us update our bond rating through Moody's. And just like Sean said, it does not extend the original term at all, so it would still be for 10 years. So the savings is over the 10-year. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you and Sean for continuing to look for opportunities to gain leverage on savings. Doesn't matter what the time frame is. You never know what's coming down the path financially. It certainly doesn't get any cheaper, and with moves like this, it certainly continues to put us in a better position to make better decisions and to move the community forward in certain areas that the council or the residents desire. So thank you. Any further discussion? Dennis?
Yeah, I was just, Sean, curious, how much left on that bond?
Mark, do you have the schedule there, please?
And then the other thing, that interest rate, it seemed pretty high, 11%. I mean, is that just kind of the
That's
bond?
that's the savings.
Oh, I thought you said that was, what's the interest that we're paying on that then?
It's a 4% at this point.
Okay,
So the 2.29 million is left on the bonds. That's on page 1 of the report.
Mhm.
And the savings is identified on page 2 to make about $305,000. It identifies how much per year, and that's estimated, of course, until we close on the bonds.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mr. Santos.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank Sean and Mark for their job and keeping us informed. Thank you so much.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, let's move on to number 39, resolution of the council in reference to refunding 2011 general obligation bonds.
Motion to pass said resolution.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Santos.
I'll leave it up to you, Mr. President. I don't want to take something away from you.
Well, listen, I certainly have missed the vice president, but thank you very much. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Thank
See you next month.